So the starting point of our practice is to situate our body in a way that we can that we can be still, that we can be relatively comfortable. Um, we can stay alert. So I think there can be a tendency when we're sort of just hanging out uh, to maybe lose some of the rigor of a typical meditation posture. And uh, well, that can certainly be relaxing, but it's not ideal in terms of the kind of clarity that we'd hope to develop with mindfulness. So just trying to find a balance between being comfortable and still being alert and clear-headed. You can close your eyes or you can just lower your gaze. So that we can take some time not looking at a screen. One of the challenges of this time for us. So much screen time. And as you turn inward, beginning by just having a general awareness of your body, of how your body is feeling, how you're holding your body. And then beginning by relaxing the muscles in your face, relaxing your jaw, softening the eyes, just having a sense of the face dropping, not holding an expression. And releasing the shoulders, softening the belly, opening the chest. And there's a sense that there's plenty of room for the breath. And relaxing through the hips and pelvis, the legs and feet. So now there's a sense of really releasing the body, just while holding yourself upright, kind of letting go of any tension, letting the body relax. And noticing any sounds in your environment. With mindfulness, we're not trying to block out really anything, sounds or other so-called distractions. Nothing's really a distraction with mindfulness. Anything can be paid attention to. So this kind of beginning phase is sort of a sense of just opening to what's present in the body and sounds, noticing too just how you're feeling on the emotional or mood level. Is there something distinct there or more subtle? Just how are you feeling? It's easy in the kind of rush to start meditating, to concentrate on the breath, to overlook the obvious, whether it's something in the body or an emotional state. And so mindfulness invites us to be open and explore what's present. And finally, arriving at the breath, can feel the breath at the nostrils, the touch of air coming in and out, or you might follow it in the belly, feeling the movement, the rise and fall with each breath. So the encouragement is to let the focus on the breath be kind of in the foreground of your awareness, but then still allowing the other elements, body, sound, feeling, to be in the background so that if they kind of call to you, you can shift your attention. If some strong feeling or sound or sensation arises, you don't try to block it out. You shift from the breath to that, at least momentarily. Sometimes a steady sound will start up, like someone's car idling in front of their house or someone taking a shower. And you can just put your attention then on the sound for a while. Well, that's present. Explore it just like you explore the breath to see the details of the experience. Otherwise, we're likely to think of it as an annoyance or an interruption. So there's this kind of surrender that we're practicing, surrendering to whatever is calling to us. We can surrender as well to the breath. Just allow yourself to get inside the breath, to really feel it, to examine the sensations, not just noticing in and out, but starting to be aware of the whole subtle range of sensations that arise, breathing in, breathing out. It's natural for the mind to wander. So when we make this effort to focus on a single object of awareness, the breath, very often we'll find ourselves going off into a story, a plan or a memory, some analysis or question. Maybe you'll be reviewing a conversation, all the things that we do, and just deciding, well, I'm going to pay attention to the breath. The mind doesn't really obey that order. So it requires patience on our part, patience with ourselves, patience with our mind, and a willingness to just keep coming back. Once we understand that the thoughts that are arising aren't a mistake or even a problem, then we can engage this process with less kind of struggle, less striving. That doesn't mean we don't make an effort. It's just that that effort itself isn't sort of infused with a sense of urgency or lack or need. It's guided by wisdom, the understanding that there's great value in being present. Our heart longs for the peace that just being with the breath can bring us. So there's an attitude of kindness and understanding, understanding ourselves, our mind, not sort of an attitude of demanding. There are some different tools or techniques for working with the breath. One simple one is to just name the in breath and the out breath. Just saying in, out as you're breathing. Or if you're paying attention to the breath at the belly, you could say rising, falling. This gives us a little more to hold on to than just the sensation. And the words can kind of help to replace the thoughts that typically fill the mind. when you do notice the thoughts, when you notice that the mind is wandering, uh, just be clear that that's what's happening. Sort of acknowledge that. Maybe take a glimpse at the thought before coming back to the breath. Sort of see what type of thought it is. You don't want to go chasing the thought, but just to start to notice patterns. And then as you come back to the breath, notice how you're feeling right now. Very often, when the mind wanders, a certain stress or discomfort arises in the body. So we start to make the connection of how we fall into moods and states of physical tension or discomfort, stress, agitation. So then you see that and then take a breath and see if you can release that. Just settle back again. Just let the mindfulness of breath do its natural healing work. All right. Hmm. I don't usually meditate after dinner unless I'm on retreat or teaching. So it's actually very nice to do in the evening like this. Probably better for my psyche than MSNBC. Uh, Before I start, I just want to say how much I appreciate people's Dana. Um, you know, many of you are regularly giving uh, donations for my teaching, and I really appreciate people doing that. And just say, Dana, for those who aren't familiar with the term, it's a Buddhist term. It's uh, that means generosity, means giving, and it's it's the tradition is to support the teachings in this way, and without kind of a charge, and when I can, I really like to be able to just teach and not have to have there be a barrier of money for people. Um, but at the same time, I do need support, and it really, I just for you to know, like I don't thank people individually very often uh, for their dana, but I always notice and think of you uh, when I see it coming in. So thank you. Um, so just to say that Angela, who uh, records this, that's part of her dana is recording it and getting the getting the recordings to me and editing, taking out little parts of them and helping me. So and she also puts up the information about how to give dana to me, but it's also on my website if you're interested. Um, so we're still in step six, and I was going over these notes today, and I have to say I have said this before, uh, but this is like really one of my favorite chapters in this book, One Breath at a Time, which is my first book. This is the second edition of it, I guess, uh, the copy that I have here. But for some reason, it's kind of like I don't know. A lot of things came together for me in writing this chapter, step six, and step six isn't one that I typically would, um, think in the 12 steps would be an exciting one. Step six says we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, um, and so it's another one of these God steps, which I don't really address directly very much in this chapter. Uh, I address it in other chapters, and in fact, I address it a lot in my second book. Um, but it's kind of a preparatory step. We're entirely ready to have our defective character removed. We're not doing it. We're just preparing. But as I think of that step, I think of a lot of the work of change, it is the preparation for it to happen. I think of meditation itself, sitting down to meditate, as a preparation for something to happen. It's not, it doesn't necessarily, nothing necessarily happens when you sit down to meditate, but when you put in the time, then it kind of lays the foundation for insight ultimately. And that's, uh, which then is really, we could say that's the foundation for the letting go. So if step seven is really about letting go, this is like what work do we need to do to allow letting go to happen. So this section that I've gotten to is titled "Who You Callin Defective," uh, and obviously referring to the term defects of character in the step, which is certainly one of the phrases that's that people tend to find objectionable in the steps. There are many words in the steps that people find objectionable, I would say. God, powerless, defects, flaw. What's the one in uh, um, shortcomings, I suppose. Uh, and so I'm kind of addressing this here. Um, and so I'll read the beginning of this, and it refers back to a character, someone who appeared earlier in the step named Brad, um, uh, who was struggling with his own really negative thoughts about himself. So when Brad talked to me about the painfully self-destructive thoughts that blocked his ability to practice metta, he was expressing a sense that he was somehow at his core defective. This tendency to view ourselves as inherently flawed can make the phrase defects of character a difficult one. It suggests something personal, something which is mine. In Buddhist thinking, however, the self is a construction, a collection of processes, experiences that have no center and are inherently empty of substance. Although we may have tendencies and habits of mind, we don't have a hard and fast character. Who we are is much more fluid than that, more dynamic. Beneath the hindrances, beneath the thoughts, feelings, and sensations is pure awareness, Buddha nature, Buddha mind. If we are anything at all, we are this luminous presence, and this nature cannot be defective. And yet, we can't always see this luminous nature. Sometimes letting go seems impossible. Sometimes we are completely lost in our negative thoughts and feelings and can't see the way out. Sometimes we're just not ready to let go. What then? So really what this whole section is about is this sort of pa- conflict in a sense, or, you know, uh, uh, conundrum, paradox uh, of, yeah, there's no self, but I keep screwing up, or, um, I just, if I just let go, or see myself as just having Buddha nature, then I can transcend all this. Yeah, but when I do that, there's a risk in that. There's a risk of what's called spiritual bypass. Like I'm just going to be really spiritual, and I'm going to pretend like all that shit that I'm doing on my off hours doesn't count. Uh, so I jump into one thing here, but I'm going to pass over it and maybe come back to it, um, because the thing that I had this experience where, I was in this phase before I got sober, and it was where I sort of had this view of like, oh, well, it's all perfect, whatever it is, if I'm drinking, if I'm drunk, it's still just like perfect. It's like I'm a drunken Buddha, and this is kind of, an idea that's, you see, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche kind of would imply this. He said that he would turn alcohol into nectar in his body, um, which didn't work out for his liver. But so there's this real challenge between these two ideas of uh, in in Theravadan Buddhism, sila or morality is foundational. But in some of the other later forms of Buddhism, Mahayana or Vajrayana, which is Tibetan Buddhism, there's kind of a sense that, well, everything is relative, and you don't necessarily have to, you can sort of transcend those duality of morality. Uh, and what I'm getting at here is like the danger of that. Um, so I'll read a little bit of this, more of this. As I admitted in step 4, uh, and now I'm talking about this denial. This was a particularly powerful strain of denial. This idea that, you're a Buddha no matter what, you're just perfect. It just doesn't matter what you do. One that had its roots in my distorted take on Ananda's teaching, and Ananda was this sort of half-baked guru that I followed for a while, as well as my limited understanding of Buddhism. It may be possible that someone has achieved a state from which all action is sacred. So maybe you can get to a point where you transcend karma. More often than not, though, such behavior is hard to justify. Debates continue to this day over the actions of certain gurus and teachers. However, for me, and probably most alcoholics and addicts, the idea that I could be enlightened and loaded at the same time is simply a seductive way to avoid responsibility. Because from this viewpoint, I had no defect of character to let go of. Anything I did was perfect. How convenient. I drove home drunk, washed my face and hands. Well, this is describing the situation where I was sort of cheating, on my girlfriend that I was living with, and would, just, um, come home and like try to get her perfume off me before I got in bed with my sleeping girlfriend. Waking in the morning with a crushing headache and suicidal thoughts, I passed into despair, another place from which responsibility or constructive action was impossible. For months, I swung on this pendulum from drunken delusion to depressive self-hatred, never reaching a middle ground from which I might address the truth of what was happening. I was abusing drugs and alcohol and betraying my own values of honesty, clarity, and kindness. I was too drained by day to meditate, too drunk at night. My spiritual life was a sham, a fiction. I'm not the only person who's ever fallen into this trap. Buddhism and other Eastern philosophies have been used as a justification for all kinds of behavior over the years. Compassionate acceptance of who we are can easily tip into denial of responsibility for our self-centered behavior. So I think that makes the point. And I want to share with you a piece of literature, if I can find it. Yes. This is an article that was written back in 1990. Hang on a second. By Kathy Butler. Katie Butler, sorry. And it kind of reviews and gets into, it's kind of like investigative reporting of drunken and immoral gurus, from the Zen to Tibetan to, I think it might cover some Hindus as well. But it really does a great job of kind of describing this, and it comes to this. I find it still to be a very relevant. It's 30 years old, but it's still kind of very sharp in that she kind of views these what happens in those communities when there's a guru that everybody's allowing to behave in inappropriate ways, typically sexual, but often with drugs or alcohol, and not not unusually money as well, that these communities turn into like dysfunctional families where the guru is like the father figure that everybody has to protect. And so everybody has to be in denial about what this father figure is doing and support it. And so everybody's playing these roles, these codependent, roles that are incredibly harmful and dysfunctional. Um, so it's a really interesting article. If you're interested in it, it's in the chat. You can click on it. Uh, so this is where I found myself at that point, where in this kind of, I was kind of in that place for years of sort of just this phony spirituality. I mean, I'd been very serious as a meditator. I'd done a lot of I did a whole bunch of retreats in 1 year, and then I kinda wound up just hanging out, uh, was homeless for a while, and my life was a wreck, but I had this idea that somehow maybe I'm already enlightened, you know? But, uh, just 'cause, uh, and so, this is, bringing it back to the step and the language of the step, you know, that we might object to the word defect of character, the phrase defective character, and say, "Well, I don't really like that idea of calling it my character that is defective." Fine, right? But what's important isn't necessarily to adopt that particular language, but to recognize that there's stuff we have to deal with, right? That each of us has issues of some kind, whether you call them shortcomings, defects of character, or your moral inventory, or something, that sounds better. Issues, maybe. Um, but that we have to confront this stuff, or else we just like sort of live in this kind of spiritual bypass, this realm of denial. Uh, and and so I really appreciate people's discomfort with some of the language in the steps. But what I think is so important is for people to say, okay, I don't like this language, but is there something that it's pointing to that I need to address? So um, I'm going to shift gears a little bit because, in the typical way that I don't quite understand how this book was written, there's another little piece in here, right in the middle of the section, uh, that I think is really important. And so I'm going to read this section. Uh, During a period of depression some years ago, I called one of my teachers. As I described my feelings and my struggle with negative thoughts, he asked me if there was any time when I wasn't depressed. My answer was, no, I'm depressed. And I would say, I'm always depressed. Right? I would say, end of story. But he encouraged me to notice if there were moments or times in the day where I wasn't feeling this way. And of course, there were. He encouraged me to notice these moments instead of focusing exclusively on the painful ones. What he was showing me that was that my self-image was of a person who was always depressed, but in fact, this was not true. How you think about yourself is important to how you feel about yourself. If you think, I'm defective or I'm depressed, it can create a negative self-image. Sure, you would need to admit your failings, but you don't have to see yourself as a failure. So, but coming back to this, this was really a critical piece for me and continues to be a really important piece for me in working with depression, which is noticing how I label it and what that labeling does to my mind state. When I say I'm depressed, it reinforces that feeling. And in fact, even saying it is kind of a depressing thought. So it's like doubling down on it. Instead of just saying, "Oh, I have this feeling that's really unpleasant. It's a depressive feeling," you know, then, which suggests something more dynamic, more fluid, as the language I used earlier in that section. Whereas, like, "I'm depressed" is this solid thing. And it really is just, this, like, pro tip for you depressives out there. Like, you watch how you label it, watch those that moment and see if you can soften kind of that labeling and that attitude toward it, and just think of it as, oh, this is one of those unpleasant moods that I experience. It will pass, right? And what I don't mention here uh, in the book, but which goes along with this, is the remembrance of impermanence. Remembering impermanence is like really, really key to not getting stuck in negative mind states. When there's a negative mind state, they, well, let me put it another way. Whatever state we are in, because of this um, trick of the mind, there's a sense of solidness or permanence to it. And even though we know if someone asked us, "Is this gonna last forever?" We know that it won't. There's a feeling for us that this is what's gonna be here forever. It's sort of like a background, um, theme or belief that's unseen. It's not acknowledged, but we're not aware of it. I'm saying we, maybe I should say I, because maybe this isn't true for everybody, but my sense is that this is a very common human tendency to reify and make solid, which is what reify means. But anyway, the mind state we're in, and to feel as if we're locked in it in some way, we're enclosed in it. It's there's no room for movement, and so the recollection of impermanence, is the thing that lets us see, oh, look what my mind is doing right now. Oh, this isn't gonna last. This will probably be gone in an hour or by this afternoon. I won't even be remember it. It'll move. Uh, because my early experience of depression, I had no tools for it, and I completely believed the feeling. I believed that the feeling that was saying, "This is bad, it's gonna last forever, and there's nothing you can do about it," that was all true, and the last idea was, "So you might as well just lie down on the couch." You might as well just do nothing because there's no this is it, you know, or maybe go get some drugs, um, and so the remembrance of, "Oh, this is just an energy, this is just a feeling, this is gonna pass," all of that takes me out of that belief system, and and so that instead of being in the loop, which is what that depressive state creates, a loop between there's a feeling and there's a thought about it, and the thought about it triggers another feeling, and the feeling triggers another thought, and thus you get this feedback loop. You break the feedback loop by saying, "Oh, no, it's not true. That thought isn't true. So I see the thought. I'm not going to let the thought trigger a feeling. And the feeling is just an energy that's impermanent. It's not going to last forever. So I don't have to panic about it. I can allow it to be there. I can be present with it. I can breathe with it and move on. Because, of course, the best cure for non-medical cure for depression is moving on, is doing something, is being active. But depression tells you there's no point, and it's by its very name, we know that it's enervating. It takes away our energy, it drains us. So it's like, I'm drained, it's no point, I might as well lie down, my life is over, right? And this is where mindfulness is so helpful in this process. Um, so I kind of stuck that in the middle of this section because it was another piece that was about how I view myself, what I believe about myself, that if I'm defective, and for a depressive, you know, you automatically think that you're defective, which is one of the reasons why it's hard for depressives and risky for depressives to be working inventory, writing inventory. And, I think depressives, and I think a lot of alcoholics are depressives, uh, have to be careful that as they're writing inventory, that they're not creating more of this negative loop and negative self-view. And this again brings up this challenge of like, okay, I've got to deal with this stuff, my whatever we're going to call them, my issues, I've got to deal with them, but I can't like sort of think of them as defining me. I have to deal with them as a problem, but not as me, not let them define me. So I have to take them very seriously and be very responsible in uh, in my relationship to them, but I can't let them sort of, yeah, define me. So that was a lot of energy. Uh, I hope it's helpful. So there's some time left if anybody wants to comment or ask a question. I get everybody too depressed.
Hi, it's Annie. Annie bowing in.
Oh, hi.
Hi. Um, I've got the video off because when I turn it on, suddenly your voice it doesn't, the reception's not so good, so I'll
Sure.
leave it off.
That's fine. No worries.
My thinking, I've been thinking about this, and obviously we're all thinking about all these things. That my tree and loving kindness, and the little circular thing of if you get too hard on yourself, then bring in the loving kindness, and if you get too soft on yourself, then bring in that circular kind of process of when you're doing something too much and then you overdo it, then bring in the next thing. I think it was Pema Chodron I listened to talking about this really well, and I've got to find it again because what you're saying reminds me of that.
Yeah.
That if we get, because depression is obviously typical for a lot of us, and that's something I've had, and so I really understand that whole depressive situation with doing the inventory, which I'm battling with at the moment. So this is a good talk for me, and I'm thinking that loving kindness coming in when I start to get too self-critical and already feeling defective seems to be helpful for me. Bowing up. That's all I want to say, really.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And I certainly, loving kindness is, the classical kind of antidote. And yeah, and it can be very effective. And I would say we have to use it wisely because it can, even the way we approach loving kindness can become another effort at a fix kind of. Uh, and so it's like just I guess I would say lightly, using it lightly, uh, but yeah, for sure.
Hi, Kevin. My name's Catherine. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I feel like what you just described with depression is, you sort of described my month of January, not depression, but so much fear and sadness and loneliness have emerged this month. I think kind of a combination of COVID's relentlessness and what happened at the Capitol and all this.
Yeah.
And I went through there earlier in the month. I had this one day, especially where it's like, because I've had long periods in my life where I've been in sort of constant emotional distress. And I'm like, am I going down the hole? This is horrible. I better contact my step study group and my sponsor and another friend. And then I just, later, and I caught myself, and it's like, wait, you're in recovery. Things can be hard. That doesn't mean you're going down. And it was
Right.
that, boy,
Right.
the mental train, and that'll still come here and there, but I'm just trying to allow myself, like, you're a human. It's a sad and lonely time at
Yeah.
times right now. And so if you're sad and lonely, that's okay.
Yeah.
And the other piece you said too, notice that really isn't the constant mind state.
Yeah.
So that really resonated, and
And
I
we're gonna stay here.
about it tonight.
Anything, there's something back
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. That's, I think that's a really important thing to point to, Catherine. Thank you. How I mean, this is an exceptional time in human history and certainly in American history. And to maintain any kind of emotional balance is really hard. I mean, every day for me, and I'm sure this is true for many, if not all of you, like it's it's a challenge to get through every day. Um, I'm looking for ways to just keep my mind from, going down that dark, you know, tunnel. Um, so yeah, a lot of self-compassion is called for, and a lot of perspective. Like, oh yeah, I should be feeling crazy because things are crazy. Okay, that seems like a good. If I'm not crazy, then I'm probably numb somehow. And then there's just the moderating the intake of information. And and I and certainly I think like the ideal thing is getting outside into nature. I mean, even if it's not even nature, taking a walk. Uh, I've told you guys my wife goes down to the San Francisco Bay at like 7 o'clock in the morning and swims for a mile. You know that uh, that's her antidepressant. And it works really well. So yeah, thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Julie bowing in.
Hi, Julie.
I just find your teachings so inspirational and really uplifting. And you talked a lot about depressive states tonight, and I just find your teachings and the Sangha, the energy of the Sangha, just incredibly uplifting. And I sometimes feel guilt around the incredible gifts that I have gotten from this pandemic. And I don't find, thanks to sanghas like this, I don't find it necessarily challenging just to get through the day.
Mm.
I had some challenging moments this afternoon, but I knew I'd be here tonight. And these gifts peppered throughout my day really are like peristalsis for my soul.
Mm.
Keep it moving along. And I just also wanted to say your teaching tonight reminded me of the initial N in the RAIN acronym, which was non-identification.
Yeah.
And I think, we are not, our habits maybe don't serve us anymore. We have characteristics that no longer are beneficial or wholesome that may or may not have served us at one time. But I am not those characteristics. They are part of who I am. They are not all of who I am. They are part of the truth. They are not the whole truth.
Yeah.
And I can keep myself from identifying that closely with them. Anyway, thank you for a grand night. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, non-identification is really sort of the point. Yeah. Thank you. So, James, you have your virtual hand up.
Yeah. Yeah. Appreciate the teaching. I've yeah, I struggled with depression for quite a while myself. And, when I first got into the rooms, there, you know, my sponsor told me to write a gratitude list. I don't want to write a effing gratitude list, and, but it actually helped. And then,
Yeah.
come, come to find out, there's actually some scientific evidence behind it,
Mhm.
that it does help. And like, I take the sun for granted, and, sometimes, if I start going down that rabbit hole, I just kind of give gratitude for the warmth and the energy of this, just kind of shift my focus, I guess, from that rabbit hole to something else. And
Yeah.
I live down here in Georgia, and
All right.
you used to be a red state, and we've turned it blue. And
Right on. Good job.
I got I've been unemployed pretty much since the pandemic, and
Mm,
that doesn't help with depression either.
right.
But so I got heavily involved in um, campaigning for, helping out with Ossoff and Warnock, and we
Uh-huh.
got that Senate
Thank you.
seat. And it was, at first I had a lot of depression and anger. I'd go from, I see all these damn Trump signs all over the place, and I need to tear these things down and blah blah blah. And I go, well, and I even thought about buying a paintball gun and shooting them and all this. And I said, well,
Uh-huh.
I think my time and my money and energy would be better spent actually getting Ossoff and Warnock elected than it would be to
Yeah.
and get Biden elected. So I really put a lot of work into, and I was, to be honest with you, I really didn't think we had a chance, but it
For
came
real.
through.
I
Yes,
know. Yeah.
I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
But anyways, but yeah, so I guess with the depression, gratitude list does have some scientific evidence behind it. And
Yeah.
I also take a natural thing called SAMe. I don't know if anybody's ever tried it, but it does seem to help with me, help me anyway. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we got to do what we got to do. I've had a couple rounds of antidepressants. Fortunately, not in a while. I don't like the effects, but the old school AA that was like, you can't take that because you're not sober, was fortunately that's gone. I think, as far as I can tell, at least doesn't have much of a grip on anybody. And anybody who's taken antidepressants knows that they don't get you high by any means.
right.
Thank you for doing that work for the country. And I thought there was one other thing I was going to say, but I can't remember what it is. It looks like we've run out of time, although that's not really. Oh, I was going to say, gratitude wise, actually, I was just, I've got somebody who's helping me to try to like get my book out there, my new book, but which, by the way, if you don't know, I have a new book. It's called Buddhism and the 12 Steps Daily Reflections. Some of you already have it, I know. And she sent me this thing like, these people want you to write about gratitude. I'm like, oh God, gratitude is like one of my weak spots. But it's good for me. And I was grateful to her for doing that. So I realized, oh, well, there's that gratitude. But yeah, that's challenging when you're a negative person, to I, at the same time, everything around me is like, feels, very precious. Like Julie, I feel I've gotten a lot out of this time, as much as it's been difficult. So we'll be back. I will be back on Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific. So if you're in Australia, that's going to be the middle of the night. You won't want to join us, but it's good for the East Coast. Good for if you have friends in the UK or on the continent, Ireland. We occasionally get some folks from there. I think that's it. I just need to I got wound up. So thank you all for coming, for hanging out. We're getting closer to something. I don't know if you want to call it normal, but I don't know what we're gonna do. How if we can all be together, because we can't all be together because everybody's too spread apart. So we're gonna have to keep some of these classes going uh, afterwards, right? Yeah, in the after times. Yeah. All right. So stay safe, get vaccinated. Blessings. I'll see you all hopefully soon.